Good morning. It's so good to be here with you. Welcome to those in here, also to those watching online. We're so glad you're here with us this morning. And it is an honor and a privilege for me to be here and to have this opportunity to share what God has placed on my heart for this message and this morning. But before I get into that, I want to introduce myself a little bit and who I am and what I'm doing here and how God brought us here, actually. So my name is Mark Tolan. I'm the campus pastor at our new Pelzer campus, and my family and I came here in August, and so this is my beautiful family here. I've got a beautiful wife, Erin, who's an absolutely incredible, amazing woman of God, and an amazing wife, and fantastic mom to these awesome 4 boys. When we came in August, we had 3, with 1 on the way, and now we've got 4. Their names are Josiah, Judah, Jaden, and Jonah, and they're 7, 5, 3, and 3 months. So yes, it is absolutely crazy in our household, but it's awesome, and we love it, and God has really blessed us, and we are thrilled to be here and to be a part of what God is doing here at Alive, and specifically in the Pelzer area. And I want to thank you guys for being a part of making that happen. If it weren't for you, your generosity, your service, and your vision of Alive, then we wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't be taking new territory for the kingdom in Pelzer and seeing spiritually hungry people come into a relationship with Jesus Christ and an active role in healthy Christian community. And we are thrilled out at Pelzer to be a part of the Alive family, and thank you for making that happen and making that a possibility. I actually grew up in this church. This is my home church. I know most of you are looking at me like, yes, thank you, Emily. Emily and I grew up together. Most of you are like, really? I have no idea who you are. I've never seen you before. But that's the cool thing, actually. I grew up in this church from middle school on through college. And then my wife, Erin, and I, while we were students at Southern Wesleyan University, the Alive service started. And so we were a part of that from the very beginning. Like we were part of this from the very beginning. And now God has brought us full circle, brought us home, and that's a really cool thing. And I just want to share a little bit about the story and the journey of how we got here and how God brought us back home, because it's a cool thing to see how God is working and God's timing and all that He's did in that. And there's a whole lot to it, and I could spend the whole message on that, but I don't want to. So a couple of high points just of what led us here. First of all, Erin and I were really good friends with Paul and Heather Haycock in college and then beyond. And in fact, we got a lot of fun stories together. You can ask Paul about someday. Live for the story, Paul. And so when Paul came on staff here, I remember Erin and I sitting in our living room that night, and we saw it on Facebook or something, and we were like, man, wouldn't that be cool to be a part of the Alive staff and the Alive family? And then we just kind of tucked that away, in our hearts and in our minds. And then Heather came on staff a little bit later, and it was the same kind of thing. We're like, man, wouldn't that be cool? And it was just kind of faded to the back of our minds again. But I believe in that moment, God was beginning to plant a seed in our hearts for something that He had in our future. And so it was cool to see that. And then you fast forward a couple years, and just this last January, we were at a big Wesleyan pastors gathering down in Orlando, Florida. And while we're down there, we ran into Paul and Heather, and we ran into Pastor Tom and Lisa, and we ended up hanging out with them like the whole conference, right? We kept running into them, and we hung out with them more than we did our own church staff at the time, and we're with them all conference. And in fact, there was one point we're walking through the halls, and as we're doing that, another pastor that we knew stopped me, and he's like, well, how are things going at Alive? And as he's doing that, his wife is nudging him like he's not alive, And he totally missed the warning. And it was a really awkward moment where I was like, well, I hear they're going, really good. And I had no idea at that time that I would be here today. And that's such a cool thing. And we went away from that conference with this thought in mind. And in fact, I said it to Erin, and it's the same thing we always felt whenever we went away from an event where we were interacting with Pastor Tom. And I said to Erin, and I've said it to my parents, I've said it to other people, I said, every time I interact with Tom, I feel like he cares more about our lives, our family, and our ministry than just a few years as college students at Alive should warrant us. Now, we weren't even a part of like the core leadership team. We were engaged and we were involved, but we weren't like part of that core team even. And yet every time we interact with him, I'm like, wow, he really cares about us. And that says a ton about his heart for you and his heart for this community and his heart to see the mission of God advanced here and at Pleasant View, at Pelzer, and in new areas that we'll be launching as well. And it's exciting to be a part of that. And so because of that thought, I was looking for a mentor in January, and I thought, man, wouldn't it be awesome to be mentored by Pastor Tom? That'd be such a cool thing. But I was like, you know what? Like, he's so busy. Alive's continuing to grow. He's taking on district leadership and all kinds of stuff. Like, he doesn't have time to mentor me. But then I went back to that thought, and I was like, you know what? He actually truly cares about me, my family, and my ministry, so I'll go ahead and ask him. And so we entered this mentoring relationship, and we would talk at least once a month and go back and forth. And then last spring, we had a regularly scheduled mentor call. Like, this was already on the calendar and all that, and it was just like a week after I had found out that the church I was at the time was restructuring their staffing and completely changing everything around, and I was going to be without a position. Like, my position was gone, it wasn't going to exist, and there was no longer room for me on staff at that church. And I just started looking around like, okay, God, what's next? In fact, Aaron and I, we'd been praying in the early part of the year, hey, God, if this is where you want us, continue to show us that. But God, if you have something else for us, would you show us? We didn't exactly plan for it to be that way, but God answered that prayer, and God began to move us into new things. And so on that phone call, I shared with Pastor Tom, man, this is what's going on. This is where I'm at. And he's like, oh, my goodness, Mark, I'm so sorry. But then immediately he was like, but we got this thing in the works. You can't tell anybody about it yet because it's just starting out. We're just beginning these conversations. And as soon as we're done with this phone call, you need to call Jeremy Summers, our multiplication pastor, and talk to him about becoming a campus pastor at Alive. And I got off that phone call like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is so cool. I had actually been talking to other churches, and I was already like, yeah, well, you know what? This is where God's, but we prayed about it, and God just clearly led us here, and it is awesome to be a part of this church. It's awesome to be a part of what God is doing and to come home for us. And a cool little side note, my brother Joshua is one of the residents here at Alive, and so it's cool to be on staff with him. And actually, I've met some of you because your kids are in Club 56, and you're like, oh, you're Josh's brother. And this is the first place I've ever been known as Josh's brother. So that's really cool. But after the longest intro ever, let's pray, and let's get into what God has for us this morning. Father, thank you for this awesome opportunity. God, thank you that, God, you want to speak to us this morning. God, speak into our hearts, into our lives. God, may we hear your truth. May your love and your grace ring true today in a very real way. Thank you for these wonderful, awesome people here. And God, may you bless them, speak to them in an incredible way. It's in your name we pray. Amen. When I found out we were going to be starting this series called Heart Matters, I was like, man, I want to get to preach in this series. I haven't gotten to preach since June, and I love to get to preach. And I was like, man, I would love to get to preach in this series. And actually, the day that I was coming into the office thinking, man, I'm going to ask Pastor Tom, can I please preach in this series? Man, God's really laid something on my heart. I'd love to share that just goes right along with this series and where it's going. And right after staff meeting, I was going to go ask him. And he actually came to me and he was like, hey, Mark, I would love for you to preach in the Heart Matters series. What do you think? And I was like, okay, God, sounds good. Let's do this. And so we talked about it and worked it out. And I get the awesome privilege of getting to share with you this morning. This is actually the first place I've preached was in this church, not in this space at the time. It was over the sanctuary right next to Southern Wesleyan University's campus. And the very first time I preached was in First Wesleyan Church at the time. And now, it's cool to be here preaching to you at Alive. And what's crazy is I have to introduce myself to my home church, right? But that's awesome. You know why? Because hundreds of you weren't here then when Aaron and I were last here. And there are hundreds of people that have found a place to come alive since we were last a part of Alive. And that speaks volumes, that this church doesn't just recite a mission and say we believe in a mission, but we are actively involved in that mission, and that right there is evidence of it. And so I wanted to share from something early on in Alive's early beginnings, a message Pastor Tom shared with me, that there was one phrase in there that just rocked my world and began to transform the way that I saw my relationship with Jesus, and it began to change everything about how I walked with Jesus. And it was simply this, he said this, and it stuck with me forever. It says, Jesus isn't interested in behavior modification. He's interested in heart transformation. You get that? Jesus isn't interested in behavior modification. He's interested in heart transformation. And this rocked my world. You see, I grew up in the church. I grew up as a missionary kid. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I grew up as a professor's kid. And all these things, I gave my life to Jesus at a very young age and entered a relationship with him as a kid. But somewhere along the way, I began to make it about behavior modification. I began to make it about, what I did on the outside. Did I do all the right things? Did I avoid all the wrong things? And did I get it all right? And if I got it all right, then maybe God would continue to love me, and the church would still love and accept me, and all this thing. And I felt this weight and this pressure. And as I began to move towards that, I slowly turned into behavior modification. And I didn't even realize it at the time until Pastor Tom was preaching on this, and it suddenly hit home. I was like, wow, I've really made it about behavior modification and not heart transformation. What does that mean, though? What does that look like? Let me explain it this way. Any of you do chores at home growing up? Anybody? Any parents make your kids do chores, or maybe when your kids were at home you did that? Yeah? We make our kids do chores. They're young though, so right now it's just like, they put their plate and cup in the dishwasher after dinner or something, or they got to clean up their room or clean up the playroom. And goodness gracious, like when you ask them to clean up the playroom, it's like you just asked them to walk a mile on hot coals or something. All the whining comes out. It's like, oh my goodness, Daddy, but it is going to take forever. And Mommy, it wasn't me, right? Like nobody ever made the mess. I don't get it. Like it takes seconds for that room to be a disaster, but every time they're asked to clean it up, nobody made that mess. Like it was always the other one, and always it is Judah did it, Josiah did it. It wasn't me. It gets blamed for a lot of things in our home, right? You know that? You've felt that? You've heard that? I've said that. Like that's something I said all the time. Dad, it wasn't me. It must have been Joshua. I'm pretty sure, right? And now as a dad, I can sympathize a lot more with my parents because we had to do chores growing up, a good bit of them. In fact, when we were missionaries in Zambia, one of the questions you get asked a lot when you come back is like, what was it like there? What kind of stuff did you have to do without? Because we were like way out in the bush. When we first went there, we didn't even have electricity. And so those are the kind of questions that are asked. And my dad used to kind of jokingly say, you know what, believe it or not, we actually had a dishwasher in Zambia. Like, not only one, we had three. And we even named them. Their names were Aaron, Mark, and Stephen. Joshua was too young at that time to do the dishes. And actually, he'll deny it. You can ask him, but the three older of us, we all know he always got it way easier when it came to chores. I don't know why, and he'll tell you it's not true, but it's true. Don't believe him, all right? So Joshua, I don't care. You can deny it, but it is true. We had this thing Saturdays when we were growing up that we had to do our chores before we could go to a friend's house, before we could, go out and do something. It was, you got to get your chores done. Now, we could do other stuff at home, but we couldn't really leave and go do something unless your chores were done. And we had this amazing gift of turning 30 minutes of chores into all morning long, right? Yeah, some of the parents are like, I know what you're talking about, right? And it would take all day. It should have been something that was done in no time, but we did it not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We did it begrudgingly. We did it like, we grumbled, complained the whole time, and we did just enough to get by, right? Just enough to get mom and dad's approval and get the okay to leave the house. Like that was kind of how we approached chores. Until one time it changed. And I remember this night very, very vividly, that it was coming up to Thanksgiving, and we had family coming in for Thanksgiving, and the house was nowhere near ready. My mom is a nurse. She's working night shifts. She's been working a whole lot of night shifts recently, and so we got to get the house ready. She's working that very night, and we've got family coming in the next evening, and my dad rallies the troops. Like he calls us all in. He's like, all right, boys, mom's working tonight, and she's been working a lot, and you know she's going to come home tomorrow and she's not having slept and she's going to be tired, and if the house isn't ready she won't be able to sleep. She'll stay up the whole time until the house is ready, all this kind of stuff. And so let's get the house ready tonight. Like, let's surprise her. And he starts laying it on thick. Like, you know, your mom's been working so hard so you can be on that soccer team, or so that you got money to do this or do that or whatever, and your mom loves you so much, so let's get the house ready for mom. And it worked, right? Like something clicked, and instead of just doing the chores, we were like, oh man, let's do this for mom. You know, instead of focusing on the chores, we were focusing on why we were doing them. We were focusing on the person behind them. And it changed. And we weren't just like, oh man, I got it. We were going all about it. We were getting it done. We were trying to get, as much done as we could. And we were excited about it. Man, we're doing this for mom. Mom's going to be so excited. It's going to be awesome. And in fact, something we needed at Walmart. I don't remember what it was, but we needed something at Walmart. And I was the one designated to go get it. I was in high school at the time, hadn't been driving all that long. And I'm driving these back roads to Walmart here in Central, and speeding along, trying to get there and get back in time so we can get it done. And all of a sudden, I see blue lights behind me. Bad news, right? And I get pulled over, and he comes up to the window, and he's like, son, do you know how fast you're going? I was like, not really. And then he's like, why were you going so fast? And I told him. Why not, right? I mean, what else am I going to do? I was like, hey, my mom's been working so hard, and, we've got family coming in, and she's working tonight, and we really want to get the house clean before she gets home so we can surprise her. And it worked, right? He let me off the hook. That's the only time it's ever happened in my life. I've never gotten out of another ticket since then, but I got out of that ticket. And in fact, my mom and dad never knew that happened until the 8:30 service this morning. Then they found out. And so we were just so ready to get the house clean. What changed? What was the difference? You see what had happened? My dad turned a have to into a want to. Did you get that? He turned a have to into a want to, and no longer were we focused on the chore itself, but we were focused on the heart behind doing the chore. And it changed everything for us. You see, by the time I'd gotten to my college years, I started focusing on the outward, and really, if I were honest, following Jesus kind of became like a chore to me. I wouldn't have ever said it that way. I wouldn't have ever expressed it that way. But really, that's kind of what it was to me. Like, I had to do all the right things, and if I did this and that at the right time, in the right way, in front of the right people, then I would still be like winning God's approval. You ever felt that way? Maybe you've never expressed it, but if you're really honest with yourself, you'd say, you know what, I've kind of been there too. Like, I feel like I got to, check off all the boxes, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, get it all right in order for God to really, truly accept me and love me. You see, I knew Jesus died for my sins and paid a price that I could never pay, but I felt like once I entered into that relationship with Jesus, it was up to me to keep it all up so I could continue to remain in God's love. You ever been there? Maybe because you grew up in the church and somehow along the way that's how you started to feel, or maybe because people in the church have made you feel that way, and maybe you even left the church for a while because that's what you felt like church was all about, right? And or maybe you stayed away and were like, man, I'm never going near a church because, man, they're all about getting it all right on the outside, and if you don't have it all right on the outside, you're not on the in group and you're not accepted and God doesn't really love you, and I don't want any part with that. You see, we're jumping into the Sermon on the Mount through this series, and this is kind of what the religious culture of the day felt like. You know, the Pharisees had thousands of rules you had to keep and follow, and if you didn't follow all the rules in the right way, then it just, you weren't loved by God. God didn't really love you. God didn't really accept you. It was all about this behavior modification. And if you modified your behavior enough, then God would love you. And they missed the whole heart transformation piece. And they got it all wrong. And so this is kind of the context that Jesus is preaching and speaking into when he's coming to the Sermon on the Mount. You know, it's kind of like this passage back in Isaiah 29 that we read last week, if you were here last week. And it said this, it says, these people come near to me with their mouth. They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. You see that? Their worship of me is based merely on human rules they've been taught. You see, you've made it all about the outward and not about the inward. You've made it all about what you do on the outside and not about what's happening on the inside. And really, man, your hearts are far from me. That's what's happening because of the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the time. And that's the culture and context that Jesus is speaking into when he gets to the Sermon on the Mount. And so he says these words in Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. And if it's me, like, I'm like, oh my goodness, how is this possible? What's going on here, Jesus? Like, this is crazy. He says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, before he gets into this whole string of teaching he's going to do, he says, for I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, thanks, Jesus. I feel real good right now. My chances are great. Man, these are the religious elite. These are the professional rule followers, and I got to outdo them. And if we see this out of context, we miss what Jesus is talking about here. Jesus is really just setting it up to say, you know what, guess what? It's impossible. You can't be good enough. But let's back up a few verses and see what he says there. He says in Matthew chapter 5, 17 and 18, he says, do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. Let's hold on there for a second because we can go to two extremes, right? We can go to one extreme where we make it all about the outward stuff. We make it all about following the rules and regulations. Or we can go to the other extreme where we're like, well, Jesus loves me, so I can go do whatever I want. Who cares, right? And Jesus is saying, no, that's not it. I didn't come to just throw all that out and say none of this matters anymore. And who cares about the law? Like, I didn't come to just throw it out. But this, get this. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. In fact, the New Living Translation says to accomplish their purpose. For truly, I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Jesus is saying, guess what? You couldn't do it. You couldn't fulfill the law, but I fulfilled it for you. I did it for you. What you could never fulfill, I fulfilled. What you could never live up to, I lived up to it. And not only just a little bit, but I crossed every T, I dotted every I, and I fulfilled the law perfectly. And now you don't have to depend on your goodness, because if you're trying to depend on your goodness, you got to way outdo the Pharisees, which is not going to happen. Or you can depend on my goodness and that I've fulfilled it all for you. And this is where Jesus is changing it all for them. And this is what changed it all in my heart and in my mind when I heard, you know what, it's not about behavior modification, it's about heart transformation. And God was still working on my heart, and God was still moving in my life and helping me understand this until one day I came across another passage in my dorm room, and man, God showed up in my dorm room that night. And I came across a passage I'd actually memorized on a Bible quiz team. We called it Bible Bowl then. And I'd memorized this passage, but I never really get it. I was so good at the religious actions, I had the whole book of Galatians memorized for this Bible quiz team. We got second in the nation, by the way. It was awesome. But the thing was, I had this memorized, but I didn't get it. I'd read it 100 times, but it didn't sink in until just now. And suddenly this verse in Ephesians chapter 5 made sense. Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children. You see, what I had been doing is I'd read this verse almost as if it said, be imitators of God if you want to be considered a dearly loved child. Right? You ever felt that way? Like, if I don't imitate God good enough, then I'm not really considered his child. And what we end up doing is we live for the approval of God. And that's a dangerous place to be. And what this verse is saying, you're not living for the approval of God, you're living from the approval of God. And that makes all the difference. And I broke down and I wept in my dorm room in that moment because, man, I was worn out and beat up trying to make it all about behavior modification. And God said, no, Mark, you've got it wrong. You don't have to win my approval. You've already got my approval through Jesus. He did that for you. You can never do it. You can never keep it up. But Jesus in you wins my approval for you. Stop trying to live for my approval. Live from it. One of my favorite moments of the day is when I first get home and I open the door, and we've got one of those chimes that, like, when you open the door, it goes ding dong kind of thing, And so as soon as I do that, Jaden, our 3-year-old, he pops up and he'll come running around the corner, and I see him down the hall, and he comes running down the hall. Daddy's home, and he comes and he gives me a big hug, and I scoop him up, and I just love it. And that's how we should approach God. Out of the loving eyes of a child looking up to their daddy saying, I want to be just like him. Jaden's not trying to win my approval or win my love, but he's living in my love. And there's nothing he can do to lose that love, to lose the right to be my son. He always will be, and he'll always have my love no matter what. And that's how we follow after Jesus, because he's not interested in behavior modification. He's interested in heart transformation. And when we begin to get that, it changes things for us. It's not so much then anymore that I have to do this, but man, God is transforming my heart in a way that I want to do this, in a way that I realize I get to do this. You see, it's not that, oh man, we got to get up and get the kids ready for church again today, but man, I want to go and worship God with the people of God and be part of an active role in healthy Christian community. Oh, it's not so much that I have to do all the right things, but man, I want to have a better life that God has planned and laid out for me. It's not that I've got to read my Bible and pray, but I want to have an intimate relationship with the God who created me and loved me and redeemed me. It's not that I have to be a part of this group, but man, I want to pursue God's truth in authentic community, living it out together. It's not that I have to volunteer, but man, I want to be a part of leveraging influence together with other people to see the transforming love of Jesus happen in our community and beyond. And get this, I'm still getting this as a pastor in my day-to-day life. It's not that I have to go out and proclaim the gospel, but I want to share the transforming love of Jesus Christ with a world that desperately needs to hear it. It's not that I have to quit this or overcome this addiction, but I want to be transformed, and I am empowered and equipped to be an overcomer. It's not that I have to honor my spouse or honor my future spouse and live in purity But I want to have pure heart and mind and eyes because I want to have a healthy, thriving, intimate relationship with my spouse, with my future spouse that God desired and created and designed me for. And he changes the have-tos into want-tos. It's not that I have to honor my father, my mother, but I want to have a healthy, good, God-honoring relationship with them. Or maybe for you, it's I want to show them Jesus so that maybe one day they'll come to know the Jesus I know because of my honor and respect and humility that I follow and honor them with. Is Jesus changing the have-tos into the want-tos in your life? Because whatever is on the inside is really what's going to come out. You can't be good enough, and when we focus on the outside, man, we're not going to get it. But Jesus does something in us. And Jesus is going to launch into this string of teachings where he says this. He says, you've heard that it was said. Basically, you've heard the outward rules and regulations, but I say, I'm going to go to the heart of the matter. I'm going to go to something deeper. You've heard the rules and regulations, but I want to get to the heart of the matter. But before he does that, he makes sure to set it up and say, you know what? I'm calling you to something deeper that you can't accomplish by yourself. You can't do it. I've fulfilled it for you, and I'm going to enable you to live in it. And in fact, then he bookends it on the other end just to make sure we're getting it. He says this in Matthew chapter 7, 22 and 23. He says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons? And in your name perform many miracles? All this outward stuff we did for you, Jesus. We did all the right actions, right, Jesus? But then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. It's not about getting the right behaviors. It's about a relationship with me that transforms your heart. Away from me, you evildoers. Wow. And he explains also a little bit earlier in 17 and 18. He says, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. You can't be good on your own. I make you good. I fulfilled the law for you, Jesus is saying, and it's me in you that makes you good and allows the good to come out as I transform your heart and change your have-tos into want-tos and make a new heart in you. Man, what's on the inside will eventually come out. I was in college. We had an apartment one year. I was sharing with a couple guys, and there's one dude, he's super messy, like ridiculous. I don't think he used his dresser at all. Like all the clothes were on a pile on the floor. Any of you college students in here do that? And he would just in the morning pull out a T-shirt and like give it the smell test. Yep, it's good. You know, try and get a few wrinkles out, put it on. He'd do the same with his pants, and I'm pretty sure he did the same with his underwear. Kind of gross, right? This dude's super messy. And so I need a drink one night, and I go to the kitchen cupboard, and there's no cups in there at all. Zero. All right, so I start looking on the counter. I'm like, okay, there's got to be cups somewhere in this kitchen. No cups anywhere. I start looking in the drain, you know, like maybe there's some that are going to be I can wash and use. None. None in the drying rack. There's no cups in the kitchen, and I know straight where to go, right? I go immediately to this guy's room because I know that's where all the cups are. And sure enough, open the door. There's a cup here. There's a cup here. I start gathering the cup off his window sill, off his bedpost, off the dresser, and then I come to the fateful cup on his desk. And the moment I pick that cup up, I'm about knocked off my feet by the smell that filled the room and entered my nostrils and almost made me puke all over the place. It was disgusting. The worst smell I've smelled in my life. And so after I've thrown up in my mouth a little bit and I'm beginning to recover consciousness, I'm like, okay. And I bravely and slowly and cautiously begin to look in the cup. And what I discover was about a half-inch thick of solidified milk, with rotten, horrible, spoiled milk beneath it. And the moment that I picked up that cup, I disturbed the outward layer and allowed the inward, disgusting filth to come out into the room. And it about floored me. You see, what's on the inside will eventually come to the outside. And Jesus explains this good tree, bad tree thing a little further to his disciples in John, where he says, you know what, I'm the vine and you're the branches. If you remain in me, you will bear good fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. And so if we focus on the outward, trying to bear fruit on our own, it'll never happen. But if we focus on Jesus and remain in him, God will begin to transform our hearts and the good will come out. Pastor Tom shared last week in this verse in Isaiah. I want to go back to it. It says, these people come near to me with their mouths. They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is based merely on human rules that they have been taught. I've been there. I've lived that. And maybe you've lived it too. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you're there this morning. But you don't have to be there. You don't have to stay there. Pastor Tom said this last week. He said, being lost is exhausting. But what I heard when he said this was something else as well. Being religious is also exhausting, isn't it? Oh man, it'll eat you up on the inside. You see, because being religious, man, it is draining, but a relationship is life-giving. Religion is binding, but a relationship is freeing. Religion is exhausting, but a relationship is exhilarating. Religion is exclusive, but a relationship is inviting. Religion builds walls, but a relationship tears them down. Religion is demanding, but a relationship is so fulfilling. And Jesus is asking us to enter into a relationship with him that transforms our hearts, not into a religion that is about behavior modification. And here's this passage that I love. We look at the Isaiah passage, but that doesn't have to be where we remain. You see, there's this parallel passage in Ezekiel that I absolutely love. It's amazing. And this is what Ezekiel is saying. This is going to happen. This is what can be. You don't have to remain where you were in Isaiah, but you can be here. I'll sprinkle you with clean water, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your idols. And get this is huge here. Listen to what God is saying. Not only is he going to cleanse us, but man, he's going to put a new heart in us. He's going to go on to say, I'll give you a new heart. I'll put a new spirit in you. I'll remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I'll put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. You see, we can't do this part unless we experience this part. Jesus wants to put a new heart in you. Jesus wants to make it more about behavior, more about heart transformation, and not about behavior modification. Will you let him? Will you let him speak to your heart today? Let's pray. Jesus, thank you. God, thank you that even though we could never be good enough, God, you're more than good enough for us. God, thank you that we don't have to get it all right and we don't have to perform in order to earn your love. But God, we get to live from your approval and from your love through Jesus Christ. And so God, this morning, wherever we are, whatever we've been facing, whatever we've grown up with and understood through the years, God, I pray right now you would transform our thinking. And we wouldn't make it about the outward. We wouldn't make it about behavior modification. But God, through your Spirit, God, we would make it about heart transformation. God, cleanse our hearts. God, renew a right spirit in us that we can follow hard after you. Jesus, we love you. Jesus, we thank you. Jesus, you are the King of our hearts today.